Hey there, Jets fans. This is Matt Barbato, founder, editor-in-chief of nyjetfuel.com. We want to welcome you to this Jet Fuel podcast. We are also streaming live on YouTube right now. So if you're actually watching us, welcome to that too. Reacting to another busy day in Florham Park, New Jersey. The New York Jets have parted ways with longtime veteran linebacker David Harris after 10 seasons with the organization. I am joined today, once again, by my co-pilot, Adam Zielonka. You can follow him on Twitter, at Adam_Zielonka. And this is another longtime Jets veteran, a guy who will likely be inducted into the Ring of Honor, being sort of shoved out the door by the organization. And I think you could still argue that Harris had some gas left in the tank, something he could maybe provide something to this Jets team in 2017. I guess General Manager Mike McGagnon didn't see that way. Harris is now gone. Adam, scale of 1 to 10, 10 being extremely, 1 being not at all. How shocked are you by this decision?
You ready for this, man? I am at least at a 9, and that's about as hot or strong of a take as you really will ever hear from me about sports. I try my best to be balanced and see all sides of an issue, but this shocked, confused, befuddled me when I heard this news. I am really struggling to buy any kind of argument that would defend this move at all. Here's why. David Harris, before you even get into statistics, David Harris is the quarterback of the defense. Second, David Harris is the longest tenured, or was the longest tenured New York Jet. He has spent his entire career with the Jets, and while I understand there's no room for being real sentimental in this league, it's a business. I get that, and I know that that's something you even mentioned in your news post earlier. But the fact of the matter is, it's not just that he was a Jet his whole life. It's that he has been with the franchise longer than any other player on that team. And as far as age-wise, it's a very young team as it is, and I'm pretty sure Josh McCown is like the only other guy on this roster now who's older. I'm going to check that out now. David Harris, 33 years old, going on 34. Josh McCown, who's just now joining the team, never been a Jet before, is the only guy older than that. There's a lot to be said for experience, both on a team, one team like the Jets, like Harris has had, but also in the league in general. And I don't know what you're supposed to do at linebacker now. There were already more questions than answers going into the season at that position. In my opinion, I think it's one that we've been looking. But David Harris has always been a constant, good years and bad years. When you look at the years that the Jets defense has really underperformed and been spectacularly bad, pretty much always it's been the passing defense. It's been the secondary underperforming. Take last year as a very good example. Obviously, we all saw what happened, and it's a very good reason it cut Darrelle Revis. It was easy to see Darrelle Revis stunk last year. He had lost more than a step. David Harris is still anchoring a front seven that is pretty good against the run every single year. If there's one good thing you could say about the Jets year in and year out the last decade, the last 10 years Harris has been on there, they've been good against the run. Either top 3 good or at least top 11. That's what the numbers had been showing. Even in years that Harris got hurt, that's about as far low as it dipped. And Harris is a really underrated, underappreciated reason for that. You don't get a ton of sacks as an inside linebacker. You're not rushing the quarterback a lot. You're really there to plug up the middle so that you're not allowing a runner to get 10 yards or longer on a first down run or something like that. The Jets allowed less than 100 yards rushing per game last year, fewer than 4 yards a carry. It was the passing defense that killed them. So trading away Calvin Pryor, cutting Darrelle Revis, those moves make sense. And when you also compare, I'm probably taking every possible angle, so you're not going to have anything left to say, Matt. Sorry, but
no, I got plenty to say. Don't worry.
Okay. The other thing is, I think I'm even more upset about this one than when they released Nick Mangold, because with Mangold, you could at least say that he has been struggling with a couple of injuries in the last 2 seasons, and Harris really hasn't. He was hurt once a couple years ago for a few games. He really has been healthy most of his career, so that's not even an issue either. What has been reported is that it came down to they wanted him to take a pay cut. And I don't get that because David Harris was going into the last year of his career. And yes, he was set to make $6.5 million in his final year on his contract. The Jets, according to Spot Rack and Over the Cap, two websites I like to use for these, their cap space numbers look a little different. One says $13.5 million, one says $17.5 million. But I'm confused as to why that number really matters now going into June, going into summer. Who's out there that they're going to go get? They're going to try and make a run at Colin Kaepernick? Maybe I shouldn't even say that, but who are you getting all this money for? Trying to save up all your cash. You can't take it with you. Are they really just laying down and say, we're going 2-14, we know, we're just going to give up, we're not going to even field a veteran player? I probably should take a break before I blow a gasket, Matt. What about you? What do you think?
Yeah, I'm at about a 6. And to the wise guys who go, oh, the writing was on the wall when they acquired Demario Davis. No, it wasn't. It was not.
No.
That is not true. That was a getting something back for a lousy player trade. You happen to get a guy who's familiar with your system. Yeah, sure, he could slot in as an emergency starter for you. He's a starting caliber player. But to say that made David Harris expendable, surprising. Especially given that he had made it through the entire offseason purge where you saw guys like Revis and Mangold, go by the wayside. I'm a little surprised. I mean, listen, David Harris has been, he has been as steady as it gets for the New York Jets. A franchise sort of mired in mediocrity and, tumultuous times and just a few constants in New York. And I think I regurgitated this from when we gave, the Nick Mangold eulogy earlier in the offseason. He's another guy who was as steady as a rock. And listen, he's not today's NFL linebacker. He's an enormous liability against the pass. He's primarily a run defender, but he was still solid at what he did. And someone tweeted at me saying that Harris had been washed up for 5 years. I completely disagree with that. He was a very, listen, he wasn't a flashy player, but he was almost a shoo-in to get 100 tackles every year if he stayed healthy, which he did. He had a 121 consecutive game streak snapped last season, I should say. He missed the Monday night game in week 6, I believe, against Arizona. He had a hamstring injury. So the guy's just been as consistent, as steady, as reliable as you can get. He's a good veteran. He's good on the field. He's good off the field. Listen, I understand that the $6.5 million is significant. I've alluded to what is it really getting you this year? What is that $6.5 million doing for you in 2017? Yeah, some of that will roll over, but I don't know. I'm at about a 6. I'm not totally stunned. I'm stunned more by the timing than the actual move itself. Because when you get into June, you're kind of thinking, okay, barring injury, this is sort of the roster we have. This is what it's going to look like. And I don't know. Yes, I understand the Jets need to get younger on defense. I think that's important. I think it's a good sound strategy overall by Mike McCagnon and Todd Bowles. I mean, who's your veteran leader on that defense now? Mo Wilkerson? Leonard Williams maybe, only in his 3rd year? Definitely not Sheldon Richardson. Jamal Adams is everybody says Jamal Adams is, this great leader. Is he really going to be that vocal of a guy, that big of a leader in his first season? I don't think so. Losing the hitman's a tough loss, and I do think it tells you a lot about what the Jets are thinking heading into this season. No matter what Todd Bowles, says at the podium or Mike McCagnon says in his annual, state of the team press conference, this team is in tank mode this year. They are a garbage, talentless roster. And, losing a guy like David Harris might not set your franchise back years, but it's going to hurt you in 2017. I know Demario Davis should be a pretty solid replacement. But, we don't know what Deron Lee is yet. We don't know if he's even, a very good player, let alone a starter. So I don't know. I think this is going to be a tougher void to fill than the Jets maybe imagine. And I know they probably want more versatility on their defense. But it comes to a point where you do want to keep a veteran guy who, yes, he's making a lot of money, but he's also in the final year of his deal, and he's also really good in the locker room. And, what the Jets need right now is that sort of presence. They need these steady – can serve as role models for the the new regime, I guess you could say. And the Jets are cutting ties with another one. And it's just, I don't know. The Jets have shown us throughout this offseason there's no such thing as sentimentality in the NFL.
It's amazing to me that you and I sat here less than a week ago and talked about Demario Davis coming in this Calvin Pryor trade. And I remember myself being pretty excited to get a solid starter. He's not nothing.
Right.
He's not, in my opinion, the level of player that David Harris is. He is a lot younger, though, and we know that that's a good thing for the future. Fine. And I do believe Davis can come in and start 16 games.
But Davis is also on the last year of his contract, too.
That's true. Yeah, there's no guarantee he stays longer than 2017. You called him last week. You thought he might just be not a replacement, but what's the word? A rental. Right, a rental. So
rental.
Right. We don't know what it looks like beyond 2017. But let me say this: guy who's tweeting at us saying that that Harris has been washed up for 5 years. You really want to defend that when Harris before last year made 100 tackles or more each of the previous 4 years. Last year was 95 in 15 games, very close to 100. But also, like I was trying to say before, stats are not necessarily what you got to look at when you look at guys plugging up the middle. What I should say is individual stats. But watch when the Jets start allowing a lot of runners, 10-yard gains, 15, 20-yard gains, when they start allowing 120 yards rushing per game this season, and they're no longer a top 10 rushing defense, the way they've been for 8 or 10 years in a row, and then tell me that you don't miss David Harris, at least for 2017. What you said, Matt, about the Jets being a talentless roster, I agree, and it's just sad to be able to say with confidence that the team has done that to themselves. It's one thing to say they're a talentless roster when you see it's October and you see that some draft picks aren't panning out or a guy gets hurt, and sometimes it's unavoidable. Some teams have less talent than others. And some teams overperform on paper or underperform. But the Jets have just released a handful of their most talented legacy kind of vets in the last several months. Revis made sense. I get it. Trading Calvin Pryor away made sense. And he was one of those cases where he sort of underperformed last year. Mangold, besides injuries, I think could have stayed, and Harris should have definitely stayed. So I'm really interested to see how Maccagnan and Todd Bowles are really going to defend this decision. Matt and I are recording this podcast as Bowles is on the podium. We have Max Marcilla covering that. And we're going to definitely be talking about this more than just today, right? This is going to, in my opinion, really affect the rest of the summer, Matt.
Yeah, I think so too. And we won't delve too much more into it today. I do want to end on this. So we've seen the past 2 years, the Jets have pretty much shoved guys who will get into the Ring of Honor, I think. I think these are all guys who will make it into the Jets Ring of Honor someday. They've shoved DeBrickashaw Ferguson, Nick Mangold, Darrelle Revis, and now David Harris out the door. And I wouldn't say that any of those, maybe Ferguson's, because he retired, but I wouldn't say any of those, cuts or releases have been sort of amicable. Do you have a problem with how the Jets have sort of handled this? Not just with Harris, but do you have a problem with how, maybe not Revis so much because he was, he kind of robbed the team of a lot of money. But, do you have a problem with how the Jets have sort of taken this? Listen, I get the NFL as a business. I get, like I wrote in my story, there's no sentimentality. But shouldn't a player like David Harris, especially in his situation, get a better deal, but get kind of better treatment from the team than what they've sort of displayed to him and other veterans?
Yes, because we can sit here and all agree that the NFL is a business, but there are different ways to run a business. You can run a business with a completely stone cold heart or a lack of a heart and just be cruel to the people who have worked so hard for you. And I think that that's sort of, maybe not to an exaggerated extent of what I just said, but to an extent, sort of what we've seen in the last 2 years with the Jets releasing a handful of these guys. We can agree Revis had it coming. Ferguson is a better example, like you brought up, Mangold, and now David Harris. The bottom line is reporters are saying David Harris practiced today. They saw him on the practice field, and they let him go out there and go through the motions and practice hard because he's a hard practicer. He's a hard player. He gives all because he's a leader by example. And they let him go and do that the day they knew they were going to cut him. I think that's pretty unnecessary, personally. It doesn't leave a good taste in my mouth.
Yeah, I really don't like the way they handled Harris's situation. Listen, you could say for the previous three, Revis, Mangold, and Ferguson, that they were all declining players. I think that's a fair argument. You could say in Revis's case that he was a bad player at this point, and you could also argue that Mangold's injuries warranted his release. I can live with that. You hate to see it because these are guys you sort of grew up watching and idolizing, but it makes more sense at least. With Harris, though, I listen, he is regressing. Last year showed that, but I didn't think he was a problem entering the 2017 season like I would have maybe thought Revis or Mangold would be. That's what kind of bugs me about this. I think Harris could have been a productive player. Listen, he's not what NFL defenses want in a middle linebacker in 2017. They want guys who can cover the entire length of the field, quicker, more athletic. That's not Harris's game. And, that's, I think, part of the reason why he's being phased off of the roster. Productive. And I think, you're saving some bucks, but for a team that's probably not going to be doing a whole lot of spending anytime soon as you're rebuilding this roster, hopefully through the draft, sort of empty calories, if you ask me, with the salary cap situation. So I do have a problem with how Harris is being, sort of let go. Mike McGagnon, you know what? He is cold-blooded, and that's okay in some respects. But I think, when you got fans who are paying a lot of money to, dole out big bucks for these PSL, licenses to go see this product and not even see relatively familiar faces or guys who they've, seen for years, it's kind of a slap in the face of the fans.
Yeah, if I were, if you're a fan and you've got the David Harris jersey in your closet, people are going to be wearing a lot of veterans jerseys of players who aren't on the team anymore.
Who's bringing you to the MetLife Stadium?
That's a very good question. I don't know what it would. Who's bringing me to MetLife Stadium? The Atlanta Falcons. Yeah. If anything, like the Patriots game in October and the Falcons, the two Super Bowl participants. It's better teams coming to visit. That's what the Jets and MetLife, when hosting the Jets, has become for 2017. Because you and I and every fan sees this team for what it is right now: a talentless roster, getting worse by the week, essentially. Maybe there's this huge long game, but this season, I said the Falcons because a couple podcasts ago we were talking about what non-divisional game looks like the best for the Jets, the most exciting for 2017. Well, the Falcons were in the Super Bowl. That's who's bringing me. It's not Josh McCown. It's not Eric Decker as the number one receiver. I like Decker a lot, but he's going to regress in this offense.
He could be next. He could be
next. Yeah, and just anybody.
Everybody's been saying if there would be a guy who would make sense for this situation, it would be Decker because the injuries and the surgery. And I'm stunned that he actually hasn't been cut yet because given the way the team has sort of handled their veterans this year, you would think Decker.
The guys who are 30 years or older on this roster, when you take David Harris off, Josh McCown, everybody's favorite starting quarterback. Tanner Purdom, longtime long snapper, and the guy who's been with the Jets the longest now that Harris is
the longest tenured Jet now entering his 8th year.
Yeah. He's 32. Steve McLendon is 31. They signed him 2 seasons ago. Nose tackle who doesn't play because the Jets can't get a starting
Damon Harrison's replacement
together. Yeah, Damon Harrison's replacement. Harrison left in free agency. Matt Forte is 31 and Eric Decker is 30. And Forte and Decker were brought in as these offensive pieces that you thought, you just get 1 or 2 more weapons and this offense is going to be really good with Ryan Fitzpatrick. Yeah, right. But that's who they've got. And something you mentioned about the Jets defense.
That's everybody. That's all the players over 30 years old.
McCown, Purdom, McClendon, Forte, Decker, just 5. One hand. You can count people who are 30. You said the team needs to get younger. Their average age is like 24. I want to sit. I should have done this before we
team's young.
The
team's young. The team is our age.
Seriously, very young. And when we go and do the Best of the Jets series this summer, I don't know how we're going to scrape together 20 players at this point.
It's going to be interesting. It might be the best of the least this year. So
yeah,
I don't know. I mean, it's a fun conversation to have. I mean, listen, we grew up watching these kind of players, so it is, even though we cover the team, it is hard to see some of these guys go. And I really disagree with the way Harris was let go today. Really agrees too, as you've listened, as we wrap up this show. Are there any final points you want to make? Last thing you want to say? I'll give you the floor for your closing statement on David Harris's Jets career.
We're going to miss him. I'm going to miss him. I think he will. I think he deserves Ring of Honor. I can't make that prediction for sure. I think he deserves that kind of honor with the Jets. And I hope he lands on his feet or chooses to retire, whatever is going to be best for him at this point. Maybe he decides I don't want to play for another team and I just want to be a Jet for life. And that'd be really cool. But I think I miss him now. And I think that fans are really, really going to regret underappreciating a guy like Harris throughout the last several years.
Yeah, that's a good way to wrap up this Jet Fuel podcast or video, however you are watching or listening to us. I want to thank Adam very much for joining me on this, Tuesday afternoon. You can follow Adam on Twitter at Adam_Zielonka. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at RealMattBarbato. Of course, be sure to follow the site at New York Jet Fuel. Check out nyjetfuel.com for plenty of reaction to this, including this podcast. And I know one of our other writers, Max Marcilla, is going to have a column on this news. So stay tuned for that. And we want to thank you very much for tuning in to the Jet Fuel Podcast.